Hello and welcome to RPGs Uncovered for another episode of WIP Workshop. I am very excited to be speaking with Andy Boyd here of Pandion Games on to talk about Substratum Protocol. If you've been in the TTRPG social media space, I'm sure you have seen the fantastic artwork that has been floating around for quite a while. Really awesome stuff. We might be able to talk about that briefly, but we are here to talk about the game, learn about the creative philosophy behind it, generally how it's played, and what sort of games you can play with it. So, to keep this from getting too long, if you want to stick around and hear more about what we have going on here at RPGs Uncovered, you can wait for the outro. But I'm excited to just dive into this and talk about a really fun new game. So, for a brief introduction, and Andy, I'll let you introduce yourself, but we're here to talk with Andy Boyd of Pandion Games. You've been at this apparently for a while. This is your eighth game you've put out?
It's either eighth or ninth at
Eighth
this
or
point.
ninth.
I'm not sure.
Excellent. Yeah, so I seen you've and we talked about this a bit before we went live. You've worked with a number of amazing collaborators, creatives that we've had on this channel before. You can see Stoneburner in the background.
Yep.
Love it, love it. So it's always really nice to see the indie TTRPG community working together and creating together. That's always something I enjoy. Uh, but yeah, as a brief introduction, Substratum Protocol. It went on Backer Kit not long ago. You still have until April 25th, and it has blown well
Yeah,
past your initial projections, and I
it
would say
has.
rightly so.
Yeah, it's been up for all of 8 days, and just today we hit 17K, which is absolutely phenomenal. We were only looking to raise three, so that's very very exciting. Um, it's I think the artwork definitely helps
Hmm.
from our illustrator Galen, who also worked on
Yep.
Substratum, and that and helped set the direction there was I think a really big push.
Hmm.
Um, is what kind of draws people in, right?
Hmm. Yeah, great guy, great artist. We had him on the channel before with RP
Oh,
as
nice.
well. Yeah, so let's talk first, just briefly. I like to get a little basis of the creator before we jump into the game. Uh, we talked briefly before we went live. You mentioned your last project, Badger and Coyote. You've had several up before. What got you into, well, TTRPG design?
Yeah, so I started off the very first game of TTRPGs I ever played was Pathfinder. Ended up running D&D for multiple years, and then we actually uh, kind of left our house and moved into an RV and lived in an RV full time. And I was like, I need a game that I don't need a table, I don't need good lighting, I can't roll dice, I don't have a flat surface. What, right? And
I feel that.
I was looking around, and so you just play at a campsite, right? And it has to be a pickup game, so it has to be simple to learn. And I was like, there's nothing out there. And so I was like, I guess I write my own? How does that work? And we wrote Storyteller, which is still available in print today. It was our first book. Um, and I even like went down and like had it photocopied at like Staples, right? Like it
Mm,
was a true zine experience at the time. Um, and that was I think like 2020, late 20, early 2021 is when that was going on. I ended up writing adventures and player aids for Quest RPG for a while, and threw those up on itch.io, and people bought them even though I was giving them away for free. And I was kind of like, oh, you can do that, like that's cool. um and so I ended up hiring Matt Sanders, who is a really great creator. He now works for like Rowan Rook and Deckard. He didn't back then, but he made games like the Sealed Library and stuff, and I was like, hey, would you be a development editor for me and kind of also teach me how to do this, because I have no idea what I'm doing. And there weren't a lot of resources at the time of like how to make TTRPG games, and like what how do you print something? How do you take something and publish it? I have no
mhm.
idea. Um, and so he really helped me out quite a bit of like how to ask questions and how to make games, and you do layout and print and all that fun stuff. And that was November 2021. Pandion Games was born, and we've just been kind of rolling with it since.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me just ask, what do you think was either the biggest improvement you had with that or the most challenging thing to work into along the way?
Um, I mean, the business part aside, right? At
Right, of
some point, you
course.
have to make a choice
Yeah.
of like, is this my hobby or is this my business? And so that was incredibly difficult. Um, but I think it was, um, how do we make games that are approachable and fun, but also beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
and people enjoy playing in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is I came from a D&D background. I came from a Pathfinder background, right? Like the big classics. And I remember at one point I had this whole section. It was like 12 pages on combat rules.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Matt looking at me after reviewing it. He was like, "Do you expect these investigators in this game that I was writing?" He's like, "Do you expect them to fight?" I was like, "No, it'll be really deadly." He's like, "Why are you spending so much time on
Mm-hmm.
combat then?" I was like, "Because I feel like I had to." And he was like, no, what if we just removed that completely? And
Mm-hmm.
like that was very eye-opening. But so kind of deprogramming myself from classic RPGs was a huge hurdle. And, I'm still kind of doing that today. I'll fall in a rut of rules light,
Mm-hmm.
OSR, right? Like these little buckets. And I'll be doing something in my game design and I'll go, why am I doing that? Right? It's
Mm-hmm.
because I was trying to be like, oh, OSR, you do XYZ, or in GMless games, this is how the other three GMless games that I know work. Instead of saying, how do I want it to work? Um, and how do I want that to be different and why? I think that was a huge, huge hurdle to get over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's again one of my favorite things about the indie TTRPG scene. It's that you can really showcase and help define the way in which players view what is going on, that lens perspective, taking the player into the game just by what you choose to focus on with those rules mechanics. If you just
Right.
don't have combat rules, or if it's a simple like, you know, success at a cost, failure, Blades in the Dark style, if it you can varying degrees of narrative versus crunch really helps define for the players what the game is about.
Yeah, absolutely. I One of the things that I like to do is I'll take a new TTRPG that I don't know about, and I will look at it and I'll be like, okay, how many pages did they spend on
Mm-hmm.
X, whatever that mechanic is, and it's the biggest part of the book. And I was like, this is important to them and to the gameplay in some way, because they really dug into it and they really want it to be clear. Um, and I know there's discourse going on around right now about the difference between like mechanical mechanics, right? Like the hard mechanics, and then
Mm-hmm.
the like narrative.
Right.
And I think that is finding that balance is really important.
Definitely.
Um, for instance, within Substratum Protocol, one of the things we're trying to play with is to be rules light, but add more crunch
Mm.
in the way that it's optional for the players if they want to engage and make like mechanically interesting decisions. There's enough mechanics there for them to do that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not getting in the way where you have to stop and be like, oh, hold on a second. So how does this thing function? And have to look it up and review.
Right.
Right.
It's
So that,
not all floating variables and arithmetic and all of that. It's well, from what I can tell, it's a lot of just resource management, which is something I always find interesting in a game, as opposed to, yeah, just you add this dice to this dice and subtract this, and we got this modifier over here, and that's
that's
crunch.
so yeah. Oh yeah, that's crunch. That's a lot of crunch, right? And so, that's one of the things I'm thinking about. And this game does a lot of what I am interested in doing. But the future games, you will see it really fleshed out with like cards, and maybe we're going
Mm-hmm.
to get rid of dice completely and use a different resource mechanisms. Maybe we want to do tokens instead, kind of
Mm.
thing. Um, but exactly like what you mentioned with resource management, where you have these dice that are falling in and increasing, and you have items that can go away. But also the card system that we have that we're working with. We were like, oh, what if you could spend cards in order to power abilities? And what if you also had to go verse the GM,
Hmm.
right? Like, I'm going to lay down and basically play war against the GM, right? Like, super old school game, right? Um, well, you can count cards if you want. You want to engage mechanically and like kind of min max. You're like, okay, do I lay down the king on this because I really need this to happen? But I know that he really only has low numbers left because all the kings are out. Right, I saw that. Because I'm going to use this elsewhere. Maybe for like doing a flashback or healing or all sorts of different things. And the way that we have people spend cards is different depending on what they want to do. So you can be like, well, you need to lay down two of the same suits, right? And you got to lay down two hearts or two clubs, whatever. And so maybe when you're doing something else, you're like, ooh, I only have two of these same suits. Do I want to hold on to that and use a different card instead? So those things exist for the players to engage with and think about optionally.
Hmm.
Because if you just want to be like, I'm throwing cards, don't care, you can do that. You don't have to pull out your calculator.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good segue to look a little bit closer into the mechanics of the game. Obviously, I mean,
Oh
we'd
yeah,
be here for a bit if we want to dive into everything we can do with this
yeah.
system. It's not a huge system, and it's
No, it's not.
from what I've looked at, it's very intuitive and very easy to just fall into. It has very simple mechanics that you can do a lot with. But I see that this is created by a combination, I believe your own special tweaked combination
Yes.
of Firelights and Breathless.
Yeah, so the system name behind it is the Hints and Hijinks system, which is our it's a mystery system. It's originally made for solo games, and it was our way. I absolutely love this system. Honestly, I can go on all day about it. But it was made for like, how do you make mysteries where the player is in charge of the ultimate answer to the mystery? What does that look like? And so we were going through this, and when I was going and designing Substratum Protocol, it hit me through one of our playtests where they were like, this is a mystery game. And I was like, I have mystery mechanics. And so that system is actually based on Breathless and Firelights initially.
Hmm.
So we kind of took from that and then built upon it. So that's why we continue to shout out Breathless. That's why we continue to shout out Firelights. And because, right, like these are stepping stones that built this system. Um, and I mean, they're all great systems. That's
Hmm.
why we're using them.
So for people
Uh,
who aren't
yeah,
familiar,
sorry.
Breathless is where you get the dice mechanic we use here, that step down dice mechanic,
Yep,
which I'm familiar with quite a bit. We've had a number of Breathless games on this channel. Firelight I'm less familiar with, but that's the card side of
that's
things
correct.
generally.
Yeah, so Firelights introduced this idea of rolling against an RP. I apologize if I get this wrong right now, but it is introduced the like rolling against two drawn cards,
Hmm.
and if you beat one, well, if you beat none of them, right, you didn't roll high enough to beat any of the values of the card, then it's a critical failure. If you beat one card, it's success at a cost, and if you beat both cards, it's success, right? That's kind of one of the core mechanics of Firelights, and I was like, this works perfectly because now I can collect the cards and I want the players to do something with them.
Hmm.
And that I think that's mechanically interesting. It also gives me a reason to separate out like the players or the characters' skills that they have and the powers or the abilities that the suit that they're wearing has.
Hmm.
Right. So everything that powers the suit is done with card discards, and you get cards by using your skills.
Hmm.
Right. And it's
Which
kind of
you use
this
dice to roll against the card. So it's a constant
correct.
like cycle of dice and cards, resources between the players and the GMs. Constantly keeps things
Exactly.
moving.
Yeah. And the cool thing about Breathless is you have that step down dice system. So you start at D12. When you roll your skill, it drops down to a D10, D8. And then when you want to refresh them, you take a deep breath. You take a pause and in the narrative, even during combat, which there isn't really real defined combat in this game. But
It's
it
I believe it's
um,
more narrative, like in Blades of the Dark, if
yes,
even toned down a little bit more. It's about the story more than, as you said, the
it
crunch,
is.
the
It
HP
is.
boxing.
There is an action. There are two actions that players can take, and we have a set of special actions in here that basically say if you want to do this, then you must roll this skill and then a skill of your choice, and you add those together and you compare it to the cards, and the outcome is kind of predefined, or at least it gives the GM something to work off
Hmm.
of. And two of those actions is confront and evade, and those are kind of the combat-esque skills or
Hmm.
actions that you would take, but really it would most likely be a single roll. So like if I want to confront something and I succeed very successfully, I have confronted it.
Hmm.
That thing is done. But what I think's really interesting about the system is if I roll very badly on confront, I have to then immediately roll for evade, and evade is where I can start taking health and damage to myself. Like if I roll bad again,
Hmm.
um, and so this chaining of actions where you're like, I'm gonna do this thing. Oh, I've got to go do this thing now. And your dice are degrading at each time. So when you get mandated to roll something you didn't want to roll, it's also
Right.
taking those dice resources from you. I like it.
And this
It's
is a
cool.
great way to keep the narrative constantly moving forward, so you don't get stuck in that very D&D, well, we're here punching each other in the face for 2 hours.
Exactly it. It moves very fast, and you can take moments within that quick action and resolution steps to just really build that narrative.
Hmm.
Like, okay, you're confronting. What are you doing? Go ahead and roll. And then over here, they're like, well, I want to do. I'm going to just go look at rocks, and I'm going to take the study action instead. And they're like, why won't you help me? Or maybe they decide to burn their cards in order to improve the role of the person that's confronting it. So different things like that. Because we don't even define how rounds and turns work. It is all narrative driven. So if I want to burn cards at the same time that somebody's taking the confront action, as long as the GM is okay with the order of operations that narratively things are taking,
Hmm.
it just happens.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, the longer that I've played various types of games, the more games I've checked out, the more I've definitely have flowed into a very narrative cinematic focus as opposed to, and there's nothing wrong with either one of
Yeah.
these extremes or however you would like to play in whatever combination. But I would say this game definitely does focus more on the narrative side of things and resource management to keep the narrative flowing as opposed to necessarily getting super bogged down in that verisimilitude of second by second combat and second by second stress and making sure everybody is working on the same page at the same time and whatnot. I can see a lot of very interesting, almost cinematic sort of stuff
Mhm.
with this game, which is really
Yeah.
fun. And
Yeah.
you did mention briefly the way you do skills in this game, which I really enjoy. I think it's a very interesting way that you've defined this. Being you have to take a combination of two skills. The GM will determine what he thinks makes the most sense. Then the player will determine how they want to go about that action
Yep.
based on the other skills that they use. I think that's fantastic. And then of course you're rolling dice against cards, as we talked about. Is there a, I mean that's I think the first time I've seen anything like this. What is there a
Yep.
particular inspiration or design philosophy that got you to that?
So we have been working on this game for the better part of a year at this point. But a lot of this came out of playtesting, where
Mm,
we would go, "How does this feel?" or where did this fall apart? And we kind of built upon that. And the rolling of the two skills, for instance, was one where I was like, if we get down to 2d4s
mm,
on any two skills, right? That's the lowest that you can go without that's the lowest you can go without special abilities that actually push your skills lower but give you cool things to do. Then I still wanted the probabilities, right? We're gonna get into nitty gritty game design, but I still wanted the probabilities of beating at least one of those cards to be sitting at a certain point. So we needed to have two skills because originally we were just gonna, it was you roll a single skill just like traditional dice, and um, it didn't work the way we wanted to once your skills get
Yeah.
lower and lower and
I could
lower,
see how things
and
could
then
stall out there.
right. And you do have the ability to recharge your skills.
Hmm.
But I always felt like once you got down to like D4s, you were like, well, I have to take a deep breath because it's going to be so hard to do anything positive. Um, and am I willing to take that, and then I feel like I have to take that complication. Whereas now you can be like, I might still get away. I'm going to, like, if I'm card counting, I know I've got no more, jacks or tens or queens left in the deck. Maybe it's worth not taking an additional complication right now. And I know that I can still potentially roll up to an 8.
Hmm.
Right. So that's kind of where the thought process was as to like why are we now using two skills? And then with our actions, originally it was going to be the player chooses both skills. And the more we thought about that, we're like, well, no, like every skill has its own kind of like inherent action that it's meant for, right? So our actions, just so the listeners can understand, so we've got our skills are make, dash, evade, break, think, and sway. And each of those lend themselves to, like convincing or confronting something or preparing something, right? Prepare, you're going to use your make skill. Well, so we just made that mandatory. And then we were like, how you make something in order to prepare is up to you. That's where you choose your second skill and run it by your DM, right? And come up with a narrative reason why you're using that role.
And that
Um,
that goes a long way in helping to define how characters are different from each other. I mean, how one person makes something through meticulously thinking it out could be very different from somebody who is just kind of taking stuff and shoving it together until it works.
right? They roll make and break together,
Right.
and they're hammering on stuff until the rock looks like the right shape.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Which is, I just think that's neat.
Right. No, that I've been looking for ways to do something similar myself because that's something as a GM that I run into a lot of time. I'm like, it could be this skill or it could also be this skill, and then they're like, well, what if I go about it this way? Let's just why not both? Let's
Yeah,
just make it all
yeah,
work. Yeah,
do it both. Yeah, exactly.
love it. Uh,
Um,
Well,
yeah.
just to keep this going, because I do want to talk about the narrative side of the game as well, and the setting and the
Okay.
characters and the stories, and of course talk a bit more about the backer kit and what we have working on. There is, I will say, just to wrap up, a talk on mechanics, that it does look very intuitive and very easy to learn, and then there's a lot of stuff that you can do with it. I didn't even think about the possibility of counting cards and looking at statistics. I'm like, this is just a really cool system. I'm thinking like resource management level kind of stuff, and then you're over here big brain with numbers.
And that's exactly what we wanted to do with the system, right? Is like the people that are just like, "Ooh, yeah, resource management. Yeah, that's great. That's what I want you to engage with." And then the other people that are like, "I want to make the most efficient
Hmm.
decision based upon the numbers in my hand."
Hmm.
That's also great. Do that.
And I
Yeah.
love that there's both, and a lot of great ways to tell very different stories with very different characters, with both and each combination of however you choose to go about that. So very interesting design for this game, and really, reading over the rules in preparation for this, I might not have a game I had planned for tomorrow. I might just run this.
Hey, yeah, let us know. We will shout about it. We'll come visit.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we'll see. That's always something I like to shout out when talking about a new game on here for WIP Workshop. The games that are genuinely prepless or very little prep, because there's some games that say that, and then well, you definitely need to know all the nitty gritty of the rules, and you need to have all printouts and whatnot. I think this, once you get the breathless down, you get the card system down, you can really just kind of riff. It just seems like a really fun narrative game that you can just play at a pub or something, or like you said, around a campfire, and you don't need a big table with tokens and maps and whatnot.
Yeah, and on all of our character sheets as well, all of our character sheets are actually bifold, like we call them
Hmm.
folios, has rule summary on them.
I
So
saw that.
the
Yeah.
GM gets a rule summary, each player gets a rule summary of how everything works. And the idea is that, like, the book is really just for like, oh, I can't come up with a plausible event right now. I'm going to look at that. Or, oh,
Hmm.
one of those creatures was interesting. Let's look at that creature and throw it in,
Hmm.
rather than looking up, like, let's flip through 90 pages to find the rule that I was looking
Right.
for.
Right.
So
A lot of great tools, a lot of great evocative inspiration, but the meat, as you said, is pretty much condensed down to like 2 pages,
yeah,
which makes it really easy to play.
yeah, we purposely put that rule summary right at the very beginning of the book as
Hmm.
well. So I don't know about you, but especially for prep light or prep less games, like, give me the big picture first and
Yes.
foremost. Let me just, I know that there's going to be more details that I might want to know, but this, like, that rule summary right at the top is something that I like to see in games,
Hmm.
because then I'm not like reading through a page of something, 3 chapters of something, and I'm like, what? I'm lost as to how this connects to other things right now.
Right.
We want to just get that out of the way.
Completely agree. Doing what I do here on this channel, looking at a number of different games, I have really come to appreciate a well-defined table of contents and a
Yep.
nice, as you said, gameplay and narrative summary of the game right at the very beginning, because it makes it really easy to not only get into and just process from a learning the game and teaching a game perspective, but it's a great way to just here's what the game is all about. Is it for you? Yeah, great, keep going. If not, well, there's
Yep.
tons of games out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh, all right. Well, let's we looked at the mechanics for a bit here. Let's actually talk about the setting of this game. And
Yes.
as we talked about before, the mechanics really lends to that, lends a perspective showing how players are encouraged to interact with this game, and the way that you set up these actions and the attributes and the various things you can do and all the tables listing things, it definitely evokes that sort of scientist explorer vibe in an area that is becoming increasingly illogical.
Yes. Yes. I that dichotomy of, here's a group of people that think about the world incredibly logically, and they go through reports and they take their measurements, and they're being confronted with something that science may not be able to comprehend,
Hmm.
right? And things just get weirder and weirder, and the laws that they know about the universe that are constants are held to truths. They're put in front of, microgravity shifts, and there's, time loops, and they're like, that shouldn't actually happen. And then the more cosmic-y things, right? Which we've done a really good job at not giving away a lot of the weird cosmic stuff that we have in the book, especially with, like, the portal clues and the portal knowledge
Hmm.
that people can start uncovering. That's where a lot of that world building comes in. Um, and so a lot of what we've just been giving out to people are these things like, there's aliens, there's time loops, there's these weird crystalline gel creatures that can maybe release spores, and it can communicate with your suit. How does that work, right?
Hmm.
And then uh, because it is a mystery game, we work really hard within the setting to say, this is a hint, build upon it, and that's the weird stuff that's going to happen, because the players at the table are going to come up with the weirdest
Oh yeah.
stuff ever. I cannot come up with as weird as stuff as what they're going to come up with,
Yep.
but I can give them, like, a little, like, right, the little dust that the pearl builds around,
Hmm.
and just be like, here's that, what are you going to do with it, and then just watch the magic unfold.
Hmm.
And so that's something that we try to do with the setting pretty much throughout the entire book, is just give all of these hints between, like, we have an unknown scientist that is writing notes within the pages, and they have their own view of things compared to what's being said in the official documentation, right? Maybe they're crossing some things out, or they're complaining about, the exosuit and what it's doing, or asking questions about it. Maybe they have doubts about something. um, So we have that layer. We have this strange symbolism throughout all of the book that is a very organic symbolism on a lot of the pages that might overlap some of the other content. And that's giving hints as to maybe you see these on your journeys. Maybe you see them carved into stone, this symbolism, and it's made it into the book somehow. We talk about how people who have tried to interpret the data coming from the early probes have gone into comas because they couldn't wrap their head around what it is they're seeing. So just all sorts of hints like that. I work really hard not to give answers.
Right.
And that goes back to the whole narrative and world building thing of I want this to be unique to the player.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you pick up, like 30 different people pick up the book, they're going to have, 60 different ideas about what this world actually is. And that's what I want compared to a setting guide. Like if you look at, these big thick tomes of setting guides and they spell everything out, I'm going the exact opposite.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a bunch of interesting hints and ideas and concepts that are aligned, but you're now in charge of doing the rest.
Well, I know I'm a big sci-fi fan, specifically a big kind of old school sci-fi fan, back when there was still that philosophy of not every question needs to be answered.
Yes.
And one question can have many different, often contradictory answers, which is something I really enjoy, and I can see in this. And I think this lends to a great combination of collaborative storytelling and collaborative world building at the time, and really encourages that sense of this is something completely alien and unknown, and perhaps even as pointed out in the book, probably just incomprehensible at a certain point. And that's one of the things that I found in a lot of modern sci-fi nowadays. You get that incomprehensible problem. This is the Mass Effect Reaper syndrome that has come up. This incomprehensible problem that the Reapers have come up with, and then in the second game, they're like, well, we just want to kill all the organics. That's all it is. It's not incomprehensible. We just we needed an answer. Here's an answer. Not everything needs
we
an
just
answer.
want to eat everything. It's fine. Yeah. I mean, honestly, so to that point, and we even put in the book where like so the idea is that they're going to find clues, and then they have to work to understand what that clue means, and only then can it be used in the end game that is part of this to build your portal skill, the final skill in order to solve the problem. And when we talk about the understand piece, we go, this might not be something you actually understand, but you suddenly innately feel it, right, in your soul. Like, this is what it means. But it's not something you could explain or write a thesis on, right? And that's on purpose of these scientists struggling, being like, what does this mean? I'm trying to understand it. And then maybe something grabs at their mind and they're like, oh, I get it. Don't understand. I get it. I don't know if I understand it. And they're like, oh, what does it mean? And you're like, I don't know how to explain it.
Right.
But I know what to do. And I think that's the like really cool narrative piece that I've been trying to get throughout the entire book, really.
Well, I think it's definitely coming across. Definitely coming across.
Good. Good.
It's very evocative to me of Control, the video game Control, and the SCP universe. And of course, you have Call of Cthulhu mythos scattered in there.
Honestly, anybody that wants to just like have the SCP like site up while they play this game and just start throwing SCP stuff in, like I think that would work perfectly. We didn't do any of that in this. We created all of our own creatures and little bestiary and stuff, but that's fantastic.
So we've kind of been talking around the premise of the setting and the story here, but just to boil it down to the base premise of this, from what I understand, some sort of unknown extra dimensional portal or something opened up in the very center of the Earth, cracking the Earth up, and you're sending down teams of scientists. That's what's going on?
That's pretty much what's going on. So there's something that appeared at the center of the Earth within its core. Maybe the core is disappearing. We have talks about how like the gravity of Earth is lighter now, and there's an anomaly about that, and atmospheric stripping, and there's this giant fracture that has opened up as the Earth is splitting apart, and the automated systems detected that and initiated what's called the Substratum Protocol, which is a protocol to get scientists for subterranean expeditions if needed in emergencies. And so the players are scientists that were rushed to this observatory that was built over the fracture, and it is now their job, whether they really want to or not, which is one of the things you define during character creation. It is now their job to figure out, basically get to where the core is, figure out what's going on along the way, and implement a plan to stop it in order to save the Earth, or at least save what's left of it.
Yeah, you mentioned character creation. I really enjoy games that have, to some degree, that sort of life path or inspiration character building. So it's not just, assign an 8 to this and a 12 to that. You really help define the character, sometimes even collaboratively, as you're going. So you have the different scientific specialties that you can pick from, and just because you're delving down into the Earth doesn't mean everybody needs to be a geologist. You could have linguists and botanists and engineers and anthropologists, and there's things in this book that are going to spark interest for all of that. And then, as you said, different starting items and the personal questions, things you might have back at home, whether you want to be here or not. And even world building questions there to help kickstart not just your characters and the group's characters, but get the narrative going from what is essentially the session zero, even if that session zero is 5 minutes before you start playing.
Exactly. And I think one of the things that we focus a little bit more on than I think some people think we would is the Fracture Observatory, which is this. You might not even start there. You might start by falling into the fracture as you start from the first zone. You never step foot. But we ask you about the Fracture Observatory, and we ask you about what's going on there and the culture there. And the reason being is because the GM is technically a character in the Fracture Observatory. Their mission control is what we call them. And you can radio the Fracture Observatory, and you can talk to them, and you can talk to these people. And so defining what that is at the start, these people that you'll probably never see during gameplay except through radio or how mission control acts, is defined at the beginning of the game. And I really love doing that, because it's defining the GM and how the GM is going to act for the game as well. So it's not just character creation for the scientists, it's character creations for the GM.
And it helps really drive home that the GM is also a player in this. They're not just the arbiter of the rules. They're not this, overhead god controlling everything. They're a player in this as well, without really being a GM PC, as it were. They are mission control. I love being mission control.
Right?
It's fun.
Exactly.
I think that's a great way to really incorporate everybody at the table share the onus of storytelling, which is one of the things that I really like to push whenever I'm talking with people about TTRPGs. It's not just up to the GM to tell the story. It's a shared weight that everybody should be contributing to. And I think the way that the rules are laid out in this book and the way that things flow really makes it, not just encourages, but really makes a natural consequence of how the game is played, which I think is great game design.
Thank you. And honestly, having the GM as a character in the game is one of the things we're playing with in some of our other designs right now. Is, for instance, like having the GM have their own playbook or their own class. And we say, hey, this class is built identical to all the other classes, but the abilities they have or the moves or however they do their thing is really GM focused. Maybe they appear right as they need to from behind a bush, right? Like maybe that's one of their abilities is, you know, they're a mentor to these people of some sort, right? And they're in big trouble, and he goes, "I need to be in this scene," and so he spins the dice or rolls the dice to be like, "I want to be able to appear in this scene," and so like he busts in the door at the last second, and he helps him out.
It's just
Only if he
Merlin phasing
rolls
through the
well.
cave wall again.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Right, like phasing through the cable. But like, so that's kind of the things that we're playing with in the future is, you know, they're still the narrator, they're still kind of up here and doing that, but they have this person inside the game that doesn't know everything, right? Still are abstracted, but like that's the GM, and their powers and their abilities are GM-like abilities.
Right.
To be able to help out or even hinder, right? But they have to roll as well to see how they do. So that's something we're playing with, and that's kind of a little bit where mission control comes from.
Well, it's clear you have other future projects in mind, so I might ask you more about that later. But you actually, we've been talking a lot about, at least loosely, the group sort of style play here, and I think it's important to mention that this is also solo play compatible.
Yes.
So just briefly, how might that how if at all does that gameplay differ when you're playing by yourself?
So the core system actually started as a solo game. And so instead of taking a multiplayer game and trying to tack solo onto it, we took a solo system and we put multiplayer on it. And that's why I call this a solo plus game instead of a solo friendly game. And so the solo rules we kind of have two sets. We have a simplified version and we have a more complex, like if you really enjoy running TTRPGs but by yourself, you can do that. So the more complex one that we've built into this is basically you become a team lead, you create a character for yourself, and then there's a special character sheet called the team sheet, and those are your team members all on one character sheet, and you define who the characters are. You have three team members, and when you're taking actions and you're moving through these different sectors, you're deciding, okay, is it the team members that are doing this or is it myself? And the team members can basically die twice. They have less stress, but their dice start higher. And it kind of like, right, it's a combination of three characters and one character. So you don't have all this overhead of managing four characters. And then otherwise you just kind of play through as normal. You roll dice, you maybe use a GM's what are those called? Like Mythic, right? In order to help you make decisions. But we have tons of rolling tables to like Oracle tables and ways to answer questions for yourself and discover things throughout the book. The second one is the actual hints and hijinks solo rules just in the game. And they're fairly simplified rules. So it's meant for kind of a shorter game session, which I think is very accessible to a lot of people. And basically, you go to a sector and, well, you define a character first, obviously, but you go to a sector, something happens, a complication happens, you write about it, you decide how you want to resolve it, and then you roll your dice versus your cards, and depending on how well you do, determines if you've gathered a clue and understand it, or if there's a complication and you've gathered a clue but you don't understand it, so you can't really use that yet, or it's a complete catastrophic failure and you barely scrape by and you get to the next sector and it kind of starts again. What's the next thing that you're going up against? And so we wanted to keep both in there. The more complex one for the people that enjoy that complexity, but also stay true to the original hints and hijinks solo games, which we now have 20 of, 3 that we publish, and the rest are by third-party folks. So people seem to enjoy them. So we wanted people who are familiar with our solo games to be able to come in and be like, I want to play this multiplayer, but then maybe they also sit down and they go, I just need a simple night. Like I'm going to, crack open a soda. I don't know if this is a family-friendly stream or not. Crack open a soda and, sit down with my journal for the night. And I just really want to get this out. I just want to do something for the next hour. So we wanted to have both of those in there.
Very nice. Yeah, I love that versatile gameplay. Re it goes back to that design philosophy we talked about in the beginning. You're out, you don't have a table, you might not even have people who are interested.
Right.
You want to play a game.
Yeah.
Here's a game, and I love that. I think that's great.
Yeah, and
Uh,
that's something that all pretty much all of our games embrace. Like I when I talk to Renee Pierre of Stoneburner and Breathless, and I think about like I love his games, but I always think about like, okay, how do I make this Pandion,
mhm,
right? And that's one of the things I think about is I go, okay, I want to add options. I want to remove direct combat. I want to, make it collaborative world building, but also give a little bit of bounds. So
mhm,
like the bounds is, for instance, I mean, Substratum Protocol is a story, right? And it has a beginning, middle, and end.
mhm,
There's an end game that takes place, and that's a very Pandian thing where instead of just being totally open ended, and you'd be like, this is going to go on for 20 years, and we're going to end up meeting once a month forever. You go, no, there's a conclusion to this.
mhm,
There's a conclusion to this, and hope and if we play it again, it's going to be a totally different story.
mhm. No, I think that's great, and yeah, it does really lend to the ability to well, it helps share games, really,
Yeah.
because you get stuck in these groups that go on forever and ever, and you're telling this one story forever and ever and ever, and with the same characters on and on and on, which is great for the people who really enjoy that. But especially with indie games and what we do here on RPGs Uncovered, I love games that promote well, kind of creative turnover, starting new stories
Yeah.
with new people and new players, and having the flexibility in a game like this for that to be, 2 hours tonight or 4 hours every other week or whatever
Yeah.
it may be for you and your pal, your group, whoever
Yeah.
might want to get in on it.
I think one of the best things that I've started doing in our game design, again, taken from RP, he has it in this book, he has it in his other big games. I think he now includes it pretty much everywhere, is these like GM notes or
Mm,
these like guidelines, I
hmm
think is what he calls them. And so in ours, it's called expedition planning. And that's where we can really just set out. And that's when we talk about like, here's what travel montages should look like. And this is you're not going to play every single day of them being there. When a character wants to go to the next sector or the group wants to go to the next sector, you have this montage that's
hmm
26 days long. What are you doing? Um, Same thing with like, hey, here's how combat and death from our perspective functions in this game, right? But just giving these guidelines. They're not rules, they're not mechanics.
hmm
They're just like, here's how I've thought about this game as a designer. You're free to ignore all of this, but that having those in there really lets you
hmm
kind of just say, I don't have a good way to put these in mechanics or in game design, but this is what I was thinking.
Right.
And I think that is a really cool thing to add to your
Oh
games
yeah.
as an indie designer.
Very much agree. Very much agree. Well, on that topic alone, we could talk quite a bit
Yeah.
longer because that sparked that sparked other comments in my brain. But we are coming up at that hour mark,
Okay.
so let's transition over to talking about well the backer kit and the actual campaign that you have going on for this. So as we
Yeah.
said in the beginning, it's already fully
Very
funded,
exciting.
well past funded, and we have until the 25th, so 22-ish days, 21 and change.
Yep.
So still plenty of time to go check that out. Let me actually drop a link in the chat here for people to check out while we're talking about it. But yeah, I'm most familiar with Kickstarter. Uh,
Mhm.
but yeah, let's take a look at the backer kit. I mentioned Kickstarter just because
Yeah.
a table of contents that I'm familiar with going down. And backer kit
Absolutely.
is a little bit different. But on the backer kit, I do see once again you are hit with beautiful art from the very beginning, which, as you said, I'm sure helps a lot with drawing people to it. But
Thank you,
it
Galen.
Yes, yes. Extremely talented artist, wonderful
Yes.
person. And you have that summary at the very top, and then it goes into all the different things that you have going on, a
Yeah.
lot of which we have talked about. Is there anything specifically that you want to call out that we missed?
So I think this is unique to. Uh, I don't see a lot of games doing crowdfunding where their tiers. It's like, this is a multiplayer game. Here's your nice hardback book, and your upper tiers are like, this is for my solo players.
Mm.
And we just have a whole pack that is just for like, do you really want it? Do you love solo play? You really want to dig into solo play? We are creating a custom solo play journal that is themed, and the whole idea behind it is when you do these solo play sessions, at the end you have this self-contained, dedicated book of your playthrough. And one of the things that we love doing on these is at the top of the pages is you can key out, like, this clue was found, or this was the dice roll I made, right? And so you can put some of these mechanical things in the pages, and then the other pages are for your journaling,
Hmm.
or we'll have pages for defining your characters in detail. So all characters, there'll be a spot to draw their portfolio picture and write about them that you can reference back to.
Nice.
And so that's I don't see that a lot, and it's one of the things I really, really love making are these
Hmm.
themed journals specifically for solo play and solo playing a specific game.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so we've created that. It's one of the tiers that we have in there. I'm pretty happy about. So yeah, that's
No,
uh,
that's
uh,
really fun. I can see that adding an extra depth of immersion, especially for solo play, when you have this almost like branded, like here's your catalog book that you've taken down into the depths.
yeah.
That's really cool.
We
This is
actually we
the mm,
we've got this is actually, so this is a test print just to make sure that the colors were going to turn out right on
hmm
that solo journal.
very
But so
important.
this is right, and so we've got it, and there's we've got the you know I just lost the word, portal symbolism
Mm,
sitting here on the back because it's got to be everywhere. But yeah, so for instance, just real simple, we've got like different entries that you can do, and it's all segmented out, and there's a place to put your final hypothesis and how that went, and you fast forward 6 months at the end of the game and talk
hmm
about what the world is like now, if you've succeeded or failed, and all that. And so that's all there inside the journal for our solo players.
Very nice.
um, I'm very happy about that.
And this is, since we're talking about the backer kit, this is
Yes.
the $15 add-on you have here, the Soloist Journal.
Yes. So we have it as an add-on and as a pledge level. So if you want the
Excellent.
Soloist Toolkit, you get the character folios that are just for solo play with the journal and the main game. And then obviously everything can be an add-on. We learned from our previous campaigns that if we don't have each individual piece as an
Hmm.
add-on, somebody's going to ask for it, and you're going
Yep.
to add it anyway. So it's there. Um, and then yeah, we also got Expedition Folio packs. So
Hmm.
the GM's pack, the GM folio, and all the character folios. Um, there'll be PDFs for you to be able to print and play, but these are going to be like nice, um, nice printed, full
Hmm.
color with spots to write and all that fun stuff. And so one of the things we wanted to do is offer these like recharge packs.
Hmm.
And so you're going to use the same folio throughout the entire game session. So beginning, middle, and end, you have an end game, and that's going to hold a story within those notes. And then if you start a new game, we have the recharge packs available, and you can be like, "We're doing this again," or you just print it at home, whichever you'd
Hmm.
like to do.
Oh, always good to have some nice handouts to include.
I love handouts.
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, we were talking. That's how I got my start with doing
Right.
um, uh, Quest RPG player aids. I
Hmm.
love handouts.
Well, as you said, lots of different pledge levels and every combination of add-ons, but just to wrap up the interview here to give people send them where they are going, definitely check out the link that is in the chat right now. I'll be including that down in the description if you are watching this in the future. But from what I can see, you got the hardcover up there for 40. That includes print
That's
and
correct.
PDF, of course. You
Yep.
talked about the Soloist Toolkit. You got that marked at 60.
Yep.
And then, of course, you can get the digital only PDF for as low as $15. And this is all US, right? USD?
Yes, this is all
Yeah,
US, and
excellent.
we do ship internationally. So anybody anywhere in the world, we could ship to you. We do not collect VAT and all that fun stuff. So please be aware of that, international folks. But we did that for our last campaign, and it all worked out fantastically. So um, yeah, just let us know.
Excellent.
Also, we do have a short URL, so anybody that is watching this and can't find the URL in the comments, you can go to pandiongames.com/substratum, and it will take you to the campaign page or the pre-order page. If you've missed the campaign, we'll have a pre-order page up while we are doing final touches.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, one last question I like to leave with, and usually I have to ask when this completes, when this fulfills. But now that this has well and above fulfilled, what's your process going forward? When do you expect to ship out? What's that fulfillment looking like?
So I'm very risk adverse. So we have a full detailed agenda at the bottom of our campaign. But the idea is we're getting our final edits probably done next week. The game is pretty much complete. And so we are hoping to ship out in June or July, fulfill that whole campaign. And really, the only real work that I have left to do is we're writing some final, like, in-world scientist notes, the little scribbles that go on the pages. We're finishing up some of that with some of the creatures we have, and then we're going to be fleshing out the soloist journal with some built-in instructions. And then I also want to I want to add in a place for people to like draw maps and keep track of depths within the book itself. So we're going to add a couple pages, make it a little bit longer of a journal, bigger of a journal, but we're going to add that in as well. But beyond that, all of our art is complete. Our editing, we've gone through 3 editing rounds. We have quotes, and we are ready to submit to our printers. And so we're ready to go. As soon as we wrap up the campaign, BackerKit does their thing and releases funds to us. We will then start submitting final proofs to our printers.
Excellent.
And usually nowadays, right now, they're taking about between 4 to 8 weeks. So to print books and ship out. So fingers crossed that we're on the shorter end of that. But we've planned buffer room. But it's not going to be like next year. We will definitely have the books out fairly quick.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So no definite like release date deadline. You're keeping it, which is very smart. Make sure everything is accomplished before you tell people you're getting your stuff.
Yeah. So basically, anybody that's watching, if you go to our campaign page, you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you're going to see a nice little tasks and milestones with dates and the tasks in their current state. And you'll see that after we submit the print orders, everything has an about, a little tilde next to all the dates.
Excellent.
That's when we would like to get the books. It's when we think we'll have them, which is, what is that, June 17th? But working with printers is, I'm going to be on their timelines, and the more books we have, it might take a little bit longer, or we have to wait in queue because somebody else had a big job order. So we're going to do our best.
Yeah. Oh, I know. It's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah, but excellent. Yeah, because I know I've seen some games that are like, we'll get you your stuff in a year and a half.
Yeah.
And other games are like, well, just give us a month or
Yep.
2 or 3 or
Yeah, we work really hard to be on that shorter end because so this game's been in development for about a year now, and we started the real big push back in November after Badger and Coyote fulfilled, and we're like, okay, it's time, and that's when we started building the campaign page and everything, and then we've spent from November to March just getting it 100% and go through playtesting and final revisions and getting our art created. So when we launched our campaign, we were like, all right, we're pretty much done. We got some little tweaks and last little bits to add in, but we're done. And that's how I like to work. I foresee all of Pandion's crowdfunding campaigns being like that, because I don't like our players to wait a year and a half for the games.
Right. And I love the transparency.
Yeah.
And, again, we could continue talking about production and all the difficulties of that, but that is outside the scope of this interview.
Specific, game publishing business live stream, hit me up. I will come talk about it for days.
Right. I think that's where we're going to wrap up for tonight. Excellent discussion. I think we got a great grasp of this game. I loved picking your brain about design philosophy and the way that you went about defining the characters and the expectations of this game. And I just want to say, I think it really comes through in the way that you laid it out and the way that the mechanics flow with each other. And as I said, encourage that collaborative storytelling, which is one of the cornerstones of indie TTRPG, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you very much. That means a lot, and I super appreciate you having us on and reaching out to me and getting us all scheduled. This has been a lot of fun.
It's been a great time talking with you. Thanks for coming on and sharing this. Thanks for sharing the rules with me, and I will definitely be hitting you up about more gameplay stuff in the future.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
So to wrap it up, go check out that link. But you said give the shortened link one more time before our outro.
PandionGames.com/substratum. And we also have a free PDF preview on the campaign page. That is just, you click a link and you're going to get it. You don't have to sign up for anything.
Excellent. Go check that out, folks. It really does look like an amazing game for yourself, you and some buddies, for whole group, solo play, dice, cards. It's got it all. Very evocative system. Go check it out. Andy, thanks for talking. Audience, thanks for hanging out. As always, everybody stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy. Keep having fun, and keep checking back here at RPGs Uncovered for more indie TTRPG content. Good night and happy time zone, folks. Thank you for watching another episode of WIP Workshop here on RPGs Uncovered. If you are an indie TTRPG creator and would like to be interviewed about your game on our show, please reach out. Links down below. RPGs Uncovered is dedicated to bringing new players to new games, broadening our RPG horizons with each new indie game. If you're interested in finding more indie TTRPG projects, please check out the previous episodes of WIP Workshop here on RPGs Uncovered. All successful crowdfunding campaigns are linked in the episode descriptions. Here on RPGs Uncovered, you're sure to find your next favorite indie TTRPG.